We have a nice day tomorrow, and part of it at the end of the day is we're just taking a few moments to recognise and to acknowledge the Maddens that died in the workhouse. And everybody that passed here from 1864 to 1900 will be remembering. Now we do know some that died from 1851 when we take our first inmates to 64. We're not going to deal with that tomorrow because we only have the names of some, and it probably would be inappropriate to mention some and not others. But from 1864, every birth, death and marriage in Britain and Ireland is formally recorded by the state. So we have the name of the person who perished, why they died, their profession or in some cases no profession coming in, their age of death, and sometimes things like the townland that they were from. Again, for those of you not from Ireland, the townland is the smallest administrative division of land you can get in this country. So just like in all of your countries, you have, country, province, county, and within the county there are parishes, and within each parish we have townlands, which could be four fields together or 40 fields, give or take. The workhouse system is established in Ireland after the Poor Law Act of 1838. Okay? So the lovely thing about having a country like Ireland is you can begin history in almost any year and come to the same conclusion or come to the same point. Given most of you are from abroad, I generally like to begin in 1691, which is a very important year in this country. From then on, from defeat to the British in 1691, Ireland finds themselves, the native Irish, which were Roman Catholic, overwhelmingly Roman Catholic in 1691, face a very bleak future because the penal laws were enacted. And when I was going to secondary school, particularly national school where my mum taught, she had a very black and white version of Irish history and Anglo-Irish history, and would always mention the fact that the penal laws mean that Roman Catholics don't have the right to profess their faith and don't have the right to own land, because the only way they could inherit land was converting. But in 2018 we have a more nuanced view of history, and we appreciate that that was great and that was hurtful for the chieftains. But at the top level of society, you can pull back, if the thing is annoying you at the door, you can pull back the little timber yoke and you're going to get an echo. But it's at the bottom rung of society the pinch is always felt. And at the bottom rung of society, we had a situation where Catholics weren't allowed to own a horse. So the equivalent today would be no broadband, no car, no communications. It destroyed everything. No, if you were a farmer, no tractor. And education. And we had a wonderful lady here last night. You all, for those of you that were here, you had Dolan Burke, Councillor Dolan Burke speaking. Dolan's wife is a wonderful educator, and she deals with people with mental and intellectual disabilities. And we were discussing how education has evolved when she came in for a chat. And the problem spots in the world today are the countries or the regions where there is either no education, and we see particularly in sub-Saharan Africa there are crises, and the Middle East where one could strongly argue you have miseducation, and very often that creates issues that the rest of the world have to deal with. But for the individuals themselves, it's very, very difficult. In Ireland, taking education from people and prohibiting education from Roman Catholics put us on the back foot in so many ways. In medieval times, Ireland was described as the island of saints and scholars. At the risk of exaggerating, where we were the pecking order in the world, we were an advanced nation, and we were very highly regarded on the continent. That counts for a lot. We regressed hugely from 1691, as you'd expect, and penal laws are eased over time, particularly from 1828, when Daniel O'Connell achieves a great deal of Catholic emancipation, and from then on Catholics can take positions in Parliament. Schools are built in the 1830s and 40s, too late for the catastrophe that was to come. And I say all this because in the bigger picture, allowing for the fact that so many Irish had to go abroad, allowing for the fact that we lose 1 million between 1845 and 1850, and another 1 million between 1850 and 1855 to immigration alone, let alone the well over 1 million that died of disease and starvation.
they weren't armed to the extent they might have been for immigration. A lot of the Irish going to the States were quite lucky that America needed labourers, but they weren't going out there to get really good jobs, and that again goes back to education. Some of the issues, many of the issues that we have in the 19th century are traced back to 220 years ago, where the Irish rebelled, as we regularly do, and we have a major rebellion in 1798 with the help of the French, inspired by the US push for independence and the Revolutionary Wars, and we are defeated after a little bit of initial hope, and the outcome for Ireland is fairly catastrophic. The Act of Union is passed in 1801, and from 1801 to 1841 we have a people getting poorer and poorer and poorer, marginalised more and more and more. We have a population spike, yet we have high infant mortality. And the life expectancy of an Irishman in the middle of the 19th century was 28. Okay. For the Americans among us, it was 36 for blacks in the Confederate States. It was in the 40s in Britain, and it was well into the 60s around the Mediterranean. So Irish people were living a third as long as their contemporaries in Europe, which is frightful thought. Beginning of the 19th century and onwards, we have 2.3 million people living in poverty. By the 1840s, we have a population of 8.5 million. Britain's a population of 20. And the solution, they kept trying to set people over until they got the answer they wanted. And a guy called George Nichols, who is the architect in theory, and then George Wilkinson, who's the architect in practice, gave us these workhouses. So we get our first in the 1840, 41, 42 period, and we get a second tranche. So the first tranche sees 130 constructed, not necessarily open, before 1845, when political life comes. And we see 33 built between 1845 and 1851-52. And we're one of the 33 built during the famine, or the Great Hunger, as it might be more appropriately called. And we start construction here in Portumna in 1850. We take our first inmates in 1851, and we complete the entire H block in 1852. And H block because, just like the H block prisons, you're trying to keep 4 different types of inmates apart, and they were called inmates. And our 4 types of inmates are girls, who slept upstairs here. This is the Board of Guardians room for the men who ruled or governed this region. The entranceway is the same entranceway when we constructed this in 1850 and 51. And where the Bog Oak exhibition is at the moment, Kieran Trui's Terrific Dark Shadows, was the schoolroom for girls. Behind me is an identical building for boys, except instead of the Board of Guardians room, we have the Master's Quarters. I think it was the man who managed the complex and the union, indeed. Across from the girls' block is a women's block, and in the corner is the men's block. So this will hopefully run true. You guys have driven in here. This is the girls' block where we are. That's the women's block, which is across the yard from the women's girls' courtyard. This is boys, which is the building behind us. Men here, dining hall and chapel in the middle, and that's your perfect H. And their H's are slight variations thereof for all the workhouses in Ireland. And back here, kept separate, is the dining hall and chapel, or is the infirmary rather. It was a time of crisis, so we have some similarities between British workhouses and Irish workhouses, and some differences. You came in as a family, same in Britain and Ireland, you had to come in as a family, and in that entrance hall you were separated out between boys, girls, men and women. Because we opened in a time of crisis, in Irish workhouses, the allowance for a mother to see her children on a Sunday for a half an hour for what was called an interview was never granted. Not in the 1840s and 50s, and probably not well into the 60s. So you came in as a family, you had to come in as a family. So a woman coming in with children and saying, my husband's gone looking for work, no, not allowed. And that's why we see a lot of cases where women are claiming to be abandoned. And I say claiming because when Irish history and this period was being written about first, it was generally by British historians, and they did paint a very positive view of Irish men, because they were saying the abandonment rate was higher of men of their families, but I don't accept that for a minute. In British workhouses, outdoor relief out of the workhouse system is allowed. So men could be commandeered to go out during the day for capital projects, bridges, roads. Women rented to factories, boys and girls at harvest time rented out to farmers. The income would go to the union. In Ireland it was indoor relief only, so in theory you came inside these four walls and you had to stay and work inside those four walls. In truth and in hindsight, and again I think they knew at the time, there simply wasn't enough work. Their logic for that is if they allowed people out on outdoor relief in Ireland, it would take away the little bit of work that was available outside. Ireland does not get an industrial revolution for a variety of reasons, some of which we need to look at ourselves in terms of culture. To be fair, most of it by design, by Britain, one would have to argue. Tariffs have been put on Irish woolen goods to protect the Welsh, Irish whisky to protect the Scottish distillers. It was working the opposite to what we like to think the United States work, and certainly what the European Union was designed to do, which is wealthier states compensating for poorer states. In Ireland in the 19th century, in Britain, it was working in the opposite way, because a third or so of the land in this country was owned by absentee landlords who never set foot on Irish soil in their lives. Another third or so by landlords who would come maybe once a year, not in that period, to collect rent. And a third or so, and I'm being generous with that percentage, of landlords who were resident in Ireland, and some were benevolent. And it's important in history we always allow a little bit of balance. And in terms of Galway, the family I would mention are the Dolans of Clonbrock, who are one of the few families in this area that come out of this period with any credit. Galway is one of the counties hardest hit. We're talking about a time where, for most people in this region, potato was 100% of the diet. So island-wide, the potato was 85% of the diet. But you need to understand about the different classes, the colliery classes, the labouring classes. These are people who would have been able to supplement their potatoes with milk or milk. And white potatoes, I presume most of you know, you would need 4 to 5 times as much land to grow other crops that would sustain your life and your family's life, other than potatoes. Men would eat 14 pounds of potatoes every day. Women would eat between 11 and 12 pounds of potatoes every day. And children, again, depending on their age, 5, 6, 7, 8 pounds of potatoes every day. There is a massive change in terms of the diet they get when they come into the workhouse. The conditions within the workhouses. The very fact that this is constructed is down to the fact that Ballinasloe and Loughrea were so overcrowded. Ballinasloe was built for 1,000 and had 3,000 to 4,000 in there. Loughrea, which is my hometown, was initially to be built for 600, it was actually built for 800, and again 2,000 to 3,000 in the times of crisis. And for years here we were unsure as to just how overcrowded we were, but at the very start we were massively overcrowded. It's built for 600, so 150 girls upstairs, 150 women over there, 150 men. Again, illogical because you never had a quarter percentage of any workhouse of men, because it was a man's world, travel and so on, and lower life expectancy, and 150 boys. And at the very start here, we know now we had in excess of 900, but it evened off very quickly, and the reason for that is people were either dead or abroad. So for most of the 19th century, we only have between 200 and 300 here. Into the 20th century, less than 200. And the courageous thing about the first government here, and there are many reasons to people criticise them, but one of the reasons you give them credit is as soon as we get independence, we shut these down. The criticism I would have is we didn't have a great plan B. So you very often people being transferred to asylums or old folks' homes. We've only 4 of these workhouses left in Ireland, out of 163 that are open today. Ourselves is the one in Connacht, where we're looking at one in each province. The workhouse centre here in Portumna. Kilman-Thompson, Waterford, which manages the Blue Way and the Green Way down there, and they're terrific people, but it's not open for tourists per se like ours is. Dolan and Laois, again, wonderful people over there, and they have an agriculture museum there now, and Carrigan Cross in Monaghan, which is a genealogy centre. So we're kind of proud that we focus on the story. I think it's very important. We do a lot of work with schools, and those of you who I spoke to last night will know this is just one of the projects that we manage here as a charity. We own the mental health centre here in town, which we rent back to the government at cost. We don't take anything, and we have done for 25, 30 years, managed the computer training courses for the long-term unemployed. And there's one person in the region who deserves more credit than anyone else, and those of you who are lucky enough to have met him the last couple of days, is Dr. Christy Kniff. Because Christy was here at the very start that established the training programs before he dived into archaeology and completed his PhD. He's a man who drives everything good that is in history and archaeology in this region, and I'm just so happy he's on our side and helping us so much with projects like this. A little bit about this room. You passed Longford Castle today on the tour, and those of you on the buses would have seen it. It's where we slowed up after Derryhiney, and the castle was and the house at Longford was resided in by George Conman Kinney, and I had my own guide, Pat Madden, in my car, and we were discussing the fact that Conman Kinney was the vice chair here, and as Pat pointed out, in reality the de facto chair, because the Earl of Clanrickard, who was to sit here, was rarely here, if ever here. In theory, they would meet once a week to manage this union. In practice, you can guess. Original timbers from 1850 when we started construction. Original paint, as in it's been replicated all the way around, and you have the very original behind the photocopier there, you can see. So we got a French artist in to copy it around. The windows here are opposite to how they are in the schoolroom, because here the men want to sit down, they come in actually the side, and where my office is now, that was the entrance door for them, because they'd sit down here and they don't want to look at what's the other side of that wall, and that's why the windows are high, because you have starving girls in the girls' yard. But they're happy enough to look out on a picturesque town. In terms of their options when they were in here, boys and girls got 2 hours of schooling.